Hi friends, welcome back to Arc Tutorials. This is Angular 10 full tutorial series for absolute beginners. Starting today, we'll be learning about Angular forms. Extremely important in any dynamic application that you are going to work or build. This itself is a mini series in itself. I'll be covering around 20-25 dedicated episodes covering each and every simple to complex use cases in Angular forms. Today is the introduction of Angular forms. This is part 54 of the Angular 10 complete tutorial playlist. I have planned around 100 tutorials in this particular series. The playlist link is in the description box below. I make notes for each of the episodes that we learn. Those notes and code will also be in the GitHub link. Make sure you check them out. Following are the topics that I have covered already so far in this particular series. Make sure that you check them out to learn and master Angular 10 in detail. Also, if you have any doubts that you have on any of these topics, feel free to reach out to me in the comment section. I'll be happy to help you. Today we are learning about Angular Forms Introduction. Alright, so like I said, this itself is a mini series in this particular series that I've planned. So I've planned around 20 dedicated tutorials with in-depth complex form structures for both template and reactive forms. If you want me to create certain use cases like form uploads or custom validations, feel free to let me know in the comment section. I will try and accommodate as many use cases as possible. That being said, let's get started. So introduction, right? So forms are an extremely integral and essential building blocks of almost all apps, right? If you are building any dynamic web application, you need a form, right? Even a basic static websites will have some kind of a contact us or some related forms. So you can have a simple form which has just two fields like a login screen, right? You have enter username, enter password, or it can be as complex as a checkout form which may require multiple steps, right? You place the first you enter the order details, product details, then your address details, then your debit card details. So there are multi-step process for that particular form. That means it's that complicated and there are so many validations which can also be a part of that. So we'll learn how to build that use cases throughout this particular series. Forms allows us to gather information and data from users, right? So whenever you have any data or application which involves user and creating content from them, uh, so you definitely need a dynamic forms. Forms are a good way to interact with the users, and almost all websites will need some or the other kind of forms. Now, to style them up, right? Some of these design frameworks like Bootstrap and Material Design allows us with some kind of utilities, right? For example, highlighting a form is invalid, or if it's required or if it's empty, etc. So we'll make use of that. We'll make use of those utility classes to learn how we can design those forms with the help of the utility classes. Alright, so now let's talk a little bit about Angular support for forms. So Angular has a lot of built-in features which directly support our Angular forms, right? So for example, two-way data binding. That's one of the classic use case of Angular's features which helps us with forms. So if you're doing a template-driven forms, most likely you will use ng model, which is a two-way data binding to get the data what user has entered and process it. Angular also has change tracking, which is yet another really cool feature. I would say that it allows us to track the changes that are happening to our forms. Very interesting use cases that can be done around change tracking. Then you have validations. Of course, that's one of the most key concept and component of any forms, right? Validations. We have error handling, and finally we have unit testing, right? Because any good application that we write has to be fully thoroughly tested, and these are unit testing that we will do for our forms. All right, now let's a little bit highlight about the types of forms that are available in Angular, right? So Angular has two types of forms: static, template, right? Static forms are also referred to sometimes as template driven forms, right? Because of their nature of how the code is written, where it is written, like most of the validations, coding, logic happens at the template, which is your HTML. So that's why they are called template driven forms. Then there is dynamic, or also called as reactive forms, right? So reactive forms are where you have maximum logic, validation, custom coding, everything happens in your component class, right? So in your component, that's why it is called dynamic, also called as reactive forms. We are going to deep dive into each one of these. We are going to learn at length. We are going to try a lot of use cases so that it gives you confidence in building any kind of form in Angular with really ease. Okay. All right. So that being said, let's go to the next one and kind of explore touch base. Okay. This is just to show you the pros and cons. Like I said, we will be doing a deep dive. So stay tuned for that also. All right. So static or template driven forms, right? So remember that they are the most easiest way to get started. Okay. I would say any beginner, if you're a beginner and trying to learn Angular forms, explore what it is, how it can be useful to you and your applications, I would start from here, right? So if you are going to start learning Angular forms and you're really not sure, I would say start with template driven forms, right? Now, that being said, they are very easy to use. It's very easy to incorporate into our templates. All the validations are default that are provided from HTML5 validations, right? For example, required, number, etc. Also, we'll need to import forms module, right? So that's the most important thing, forms module, right? That's what we'll be using for all the template driven forms. Now talking about reactive forms, all the form elements, user interactions, validations, everything happens in the component class, right? In the component itself. Now, why? That reason being that it gives us better control for us because we can define the controls right in our component, have better control on the kind of validations, on the kind of complex structures that we need. Also, so just remember that we don't have any concept of data binding then, right? Because we are doing control right from our component. So we won't do it in our templates. We need to import reactive forms module. That's the module that we require to work with the reactive forms. The reactive forms are extremely flexible and extremely powerful with the use cases that it has. All right. A lot of times people think reactive forms are tough, complex, complicated, difficult to learn, difficult to implement. But trust me, I will make your journey really, really easy. I'll teach you in a way that you will master the reactive forms and absolutely love it. Alright, so that brings us to a question, which is better, right? Template driven forms or reactive forms? So template driven forms, if your application forms are simple, straightforward use cases, I would say go with template driven forms. But if you are like me who has worked in different complex setup of applications, rarely you will find yourself using template driven forms, right? um, because template driven has a limitation that you can work with if you have number of fields is fixed, right? Like I said, if you have only two fields which are not going to change, it makes sense maybe to use template driven forms. But that being said, I would say encourage you to kind of think everything in reactive forms. The reason being that it's my personal choice and my personal favorite. The reason is almost all application forms will be complex, that if you're building any real-time application, the way we control the validation, the data flow, and also the structuring of our elements, that's much easier in reactive forms. It may look complex, okay? It may look complex, it may look complicated at first, but trust me, they are really very, very simple and very, very straightforward if you understand the basics correct. And that's what I'm here for. So which is better? There is no better like comparison. It depends upon the application use cases. Having said that, my personal favorite is reactive forms, and I'm sure at the end of this mini series, when you learn Angular forms with me, You will also say that you love reactive forms. You will be mastering it because I will be teaching you in a way that it will be very simple. I will make sure that your foundational concepts are really good and you would be able to use any reactive forms in your application without any complexity or any difficulty. That being said, stay tuned. The next I'll start with the template driven forms first, and then we'll jump into the reactive forms after that. All right. If you like this video, please do give it a thumbs up. Please do like, share, comment. Please do subscribe to my channel. Also, if you like my work and tutorials, please do consider buying me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/arctutorials. Thank you so much in advance. See you in the next episode. We'll start with template driven forms. Thank you.